Now let's get what's right for you. That is really figured out what it's like to work with Rafa.
Hi guys, I'm Julius van der pro rider of the year for the East Coast. I've been wearing Rafa's and then felt maybe start the chamois is really good. So yeah, I'm really happy with Rafa and the about it. It's amazing. Every year they make a big special kit and I love it.
I've got a cracking episode coming up with your course talking before it lives. But I've also got some other exciting news. You may have seen a sneak peek on our Instagram. The news is out. We have a fresh new casket for your collection because who really has nothing happens at the end of the day? This is Tommy. And this cap here for Tommy Cap Edition, inspired by the best vintage caps out there. Also inspired by the original one that was a kid. It's loud, it's colourful. It's going to drop next week. And if you want to try to get your hand on one, make sure you sign to an email list. Go to and subscribe because you are going to get the download. This is a limited edition cap. There's only a few floating around, and next week we're going to drop them on you. The guys, hang in for that. I'm loving it. I've got 3 caps now to our collection, and you've got to have one. If you're a true fan of Life in the Peloton, you've got to have one of every cap. So, guys, that's exciting. Right now, I'm talking with you, Corey Williams. So sit back and enjoy. All right, well, let's get the real podcast started now. This is talk, and this is Corey Williams. So now, when I was thinking about talking looks, Corey, if you don't know what it is, this is the DVD's extras. This is when you get the nitty-gritty, the real questions. And there's been variations of this. I started off with just a simple question, finished in the line, and so I was like, this is weird. So I kept it going. Then my good friend Luke Durbridge, I'd like to sort of take the mickey out of him, so I'll try to. So I created a new one for him, 2.0. And since then, there's been 3.0, which is super funny. This is 2.0 because I figured 2.0 is a bit more tailored to pros. And I've mixed it up. I put some stuff in there from the first one, the second one. Actually, I think there's 4 anyway. Who knows? So this one's going to run with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 topics: style, clothing, food, rituals, culture, and about you. And underneath those, there's some questions.
Let's do it.
You ready? All right, let's start. Let's start with casquettes, capellinos, whatever you want to call them, a little mini cycling cap. What's your style? I haven't actually seen you in a cycling cap in the work you have. But I don't wear them. You never wear them.
No, they seem to be a little bit tight. That kind of feels like
So have you ever worn one in your time?
I've never gone on a bike ride on a cycle.
So what about if you wore them out in the public, like like a hipster in a coffee shop, showing up a cycle cap? Why men can't jump? If you had a cycling cap on because it's
I
cycling.
know that's the thing. Activity fun. I'm like literally the face of fatigue because I put it on and I'm like, this thing is supposed to be. I remember like back in the old days, people race it with you have to get a air outside and I can't go.
Is it too tight?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, I still like to
But you got to. What I understand, you got to have a big head. Yeah, so if you guys out there with a tiny head, then that's actually the best head to happen.
that makes sense.
This one's that's really let's look at it. That's very nice. All right, let's move to the next question. How much is Chad? Over your sleeves or in your sleeves?
I don't know why.
When you get your arms down, you know, and it gets and you hold your sleeves out. And then sleep back down.
Not the time guy that I started.
So you get a lot of maybe some comes out, some comes out and it goes on. These are the 2 questions. Gloves.
That's the question.
So you potentially you potentially do some races without gloves.
Yeah, mostly this companies.
Wow, did not expect that in the prints.
Yeah, well, when you have 6 guys, 7 guys driving you, sometimes I'll be like 10 other riders. I like literally get to the front. I'm not worried about. I'm not going to say that you're not going to win.
Yeah, I love it. If you do see the gloves on, though, it's like boxing gloves. That's the opposite. Yeah, gloves off is when you say you. All right, when you do get leg warmers on, do you wear socks over the leg warmers or under?
I don't know if you go like these ends. I wear them under.
You might, yeah, that's it.
You gotta have the nice socks.
You gotta have them under. Yeah, that's the stuff, mate. Don't have them over. That's like.
How do you take them off?
No, that's right. You gotta have them under. Dervish has them over. He one that he doesn't. I've bought him a few times. All right,
Okay. If I'm running late, and then I have the time to stuff them under, I'm fine. And usually when you see me, I'm like, oh, you're running late.
Yeah, I'll get dressed the other way. I'll wear socks before you go. So my dress would be naked. Strap, socks, leg warmers, things the last thing that go on practically.
Yeah, I agree.
So there you go. All right, glasses over with the name on the strap.
Over. I don't even know why, but people always complain. Why oh crash? I never really why would you have it under?
Question. People do it. Race. Do you like to wear a race suit or Nixon jersey?
Oh, always race.
Wow.
It's go fast. Yeah, it's a little bit more comfortable. But I would rather just go really fast or make it less effort. Really comfortable.
What about training?
Oh, always jersey. You can't get in a race suit for training.
Okay, let's move on to food. Pasta or rice?
I'll go rice.
If you race, will you have a breakfast or will you do like a pre-race breakfast, which is sort of like eating dinner breakfast time, like eating rice and rice?
For me, a lot of our races started at 8 o'clock at night, 7 or 8 o'clock at night. I would eat breakfast for every single
What do we have then? Do you change the breakfast? Do you do like a degustation of breakfast throughout the whole day? You start with pancakes, move on to cereal, and then finish with like bacon and eggs and something.
I mean, sort of. I would usually live pancakes, eggs in the morning, and then French toast during the day, and then before the race I'll have like that's not great.
That is brilliant. I did not expect that. That's great. Favorite race food? When you do have to do a road race, what's that favorite bit of race food that you have in your pocket? I can't imagine a treat you need to eat more than maybe one gel. That's probably it.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, when I'm doing road races, I'm an PB&J all the time. PB&J is stuff like
Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
yeah. I've been eating my whole life.
When you go out riding, you're a coffee shop guy.
Of course. I mean, so okay. Well, obviously, if I'm riding by myself, really, it's strictly training on getting it done. But if I'm in a group, for sure, I'm stopping at a coffee shop.
What do you get when you stop at the coffee shop? You know, are you like a sweet sort of guy, or are you like a savoury guy getting you know, a sandwich or something?
And obviously, the vanilla latte, they're just giving me caffeine.
And what about food-wise? Are you good?
It all depends. If I'm too heavy, then I'll consider my day.
Yeah, okay. So you sort of semi-answered this. Do you espresso or filter there?
Express.
Yeah. All right, when you're not trying to lose weight, when you're happy with yourself, when you've done that race that you're really happy with, you're in a good spot, what's that cheat meal you go for? You know, or you just use that, mate, go treat yourself.
Where's fries?
Any specific place or just anywhere?
I mean, 5 guys is good. I had 5 guys.
I haven't, but I'm aware of it.
It's a burger. It's so good. It's like, I remember it right now when I was just not just getting racing, but starting to go to like the pro racing. I got dropped like that at about 10 days with a strict 5 guy. The race isn't even over yet. I went straight to 5 guy, burger straight, to eat off that split.
Completely opposite to the way I present
Exactly.
Right, let's move to rituals. What spins your wheels, mate?
For me, I pride myself on having very good knowledge of bike racing, so I feel like I'm probably going to have that knowledge in order to play yourself really to me. A lot of the times, mountains are just strength. So,
Yeah, I think you're that strong. I would say you're pretty damn strong.
no, I feel like I'm fine. But my whole thing is that that's what I said. Deciding to do is the balance and fine, but you just have to stop.
Yeah, true. Training or racing?
Right? On that. I like the aspect of getting better. So I look for racing is another thing. If you're on yourself that you can get out of the train.
Your best and worst roommate. Some guys struggle to throw something into the bus here, but you know, I eventually smooth it out.
For me, it's my worst roommate.
Go straight for the worst first.
Yeah, this guy, Corey Lockwood actually, he had the worst part. It seemed like something died, and I was like, come on, bro, I can't remember. But that's all. Yeah, I have pretty good remain, throughout the state guys.
Who's your best? Is it you? Do you like to with your brother or?
No, I can't remember. My brother's always like that. You're not supposed to leave your baseball game, so I just stay away from him. Yeah, but my favorite roommate is Freddie McVeigh. The guy's always joking, the Aussie guys they always got jokes.
Yeah, nice. I like that. How do you pass the salt at the dinner table?
Slide it across.
No, you don't care.
Slide it across the table. No, you slide it right across.
And you don't matter if it just hits something and it falls over.
Well, that's the challenge. If the kid kind of trying to figure the ball.
Do you have any superstitions?
No, not really.
The whole salt slide. Yeah, you would be celebrating. Wow. Yeah.
So,
let's talk about culture then. Favorite rider of all time?
Mark Cavendish.
Favorite rider right now?
Man, I'm always pulling for Peter Scott. Scott, I wouldn't watch. Been on track at late, but I always it's a call.
Just the caps, I guess it's still down, and he's damn good now.
Oh yeah, I mean the historic records are ridiculous.
Yeah, do you think he'll ride the tour this year?
Man, Bobby O's good. That's a new guy who will be right. Me, I'm waiting for Coop. They'll be on the commentary. I'm waiting for Mark Cavendish.
Best moment in a race for you, that moment where you go, I love this bit. It could be the start when you're clipping, it could be that last few laps. What's the best moment for you? You're like, I just love this bit of the race.
Probably the last lap, or that would be like the last kick.
Yeah.
For me, it's just like everything I've ever worked for, and I know like that was my time to do the job.
I do love that bit because you're so focused on what you can do, and how was that this would be like running you into it?
It's locked in, yeah. You just locked in. It's just like your mind just gets that.
Worst moment in a race?
Probably when look around the corner and you can see where your line's going. You just see where you're going. It's like you just know it's gonna be bad.
That is such a good call. Yeah, it's just like it's just force. I think that's it. You just like, I actually barely started this thing.
You look confused. It's so good now that you tell where you are in the line. I love that feature.
Yeah, yes and no. Like there is a feature also. It gives you the climbs of the day, like how many you've done, and sometimes it just counts like 20. You're like, you looked at the profile and it wasn't even supposed to have any climbs that day. You're like, what the hell is that? because like some of them are like half a K long, but it's still mentally cracks you.
Yeah, for sure.
Favorite kid of all time, and also team. It could be the combination. It could be like, you know, I just love that team, that kid, that whole thing was together. You could go, I loved how that team looks. The kid was awesome, but people really didn't rate that team. But I love that team, but didn't rate that kid.
That's a hard one. I think trying to think back.
That rock racing as a kid.
Yeah, I mean, rock racing was really cool, but it was kind of busy for me. Yeah, I love that team. I just so yeah, when I was growing up, man, I thought that's what I was going. I was like, oh man, you know, I'm gonna be on this team. They need like, you know, the Bentleys. They had Chupo. Actually, Chupo's favorite thing was probably one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was that Marcus over there.
I love that. And then when he got the tiger suit, the full length tiger suit, and he did a talk job.
Exactly.
It's so
Exactly.
and the muscle man, we can keep going. He had the best.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
I mean, he didn't get away with it, but like, I didn't get away with like so much on start like that.
Well, I think one year, I know, remember in the tour when he brought the US because it was Independence Day.
Yeah,
they got heaps of points though. And then I remember one year in the Giro, he had the full length suit. They could some rule where you weren't allowed to wear full length head to toe covered in microphone.
Yeah.
So there's this guys in the one you might remember then, specifically the legs off. Yeah.
That's epic, yeah.
What have I got here? Cobbles or gravel? What would you prefer?
Cobbles. I grew up watching Rebay, Flanders. Those are some of my favorite races to watch. I would definitely love to get up there and get on some of those for sure.
All right, the last topic here about you. Headphones or no headphones when you go out training?
For me, headphones. I think a lot of the times you are acting more and you're not right now because I feel like a lot of times you feel focused on and training that you have to do. It's like go to the gym, you know, your training is gone, you can do your workouts. I feel like for me, it's being going out and workouts. So heavy.
And then you've sort of said it. What do you have playing in there? Is it music? Do you have podcasts? Is it heavy sort of music? Is it just what you're feeling at the time?
A lot of times it's what I'm feeling. Sometimes I'm like a crazy person. I go out and put the music on, like shuffle, anywhere from like rock to rap to R&B, all over the place. So I'm just asking about you guys going for everything.
You remember those iPod shuffles where you had all your music on there, and it was literally like that. It was just like because the album I was it's very difficult to get the full range of shuffle, but on the iPod shuffles, it was that. It was like literally a mix of 1,000 songs.
That's why I just literally watched a video of the whole crazy what they did in song. Exactly.
When you go away on races or maybe at home, do you read books or do you watch Netflix?
A lot of times I'm actually just hanging out with my teammates. Like I really enjoy hanging out because they're my friends, right? So like a lot of times we're just out walking, all of us together just hanging out. So we don't really have time to watch anything. Yeah, nice. We're literally just hanging out all the time. We go shoot shopping. We go to the ball, get ice cream, like the scene. You're just out there. It's like back in the days when you guys go outside and hang out with friends.
That's awesome. That's even better than those experiences. PWS, V1 Spirits.
I don't really drink that, but my fiance got me into wine. Wine is great for me. I like it.
Nice. Right then, CCC, cake, cheese, or chocolate.
I mean, it would be between cake and chocolate. I love good chocolate. I think I'll chocolate.
Chocolate. Favorite cross training exercise, if there is one?
For me, it's playing basketball. That's my cross workout. I like it. It's funny because we can't flip basketball. Obviously, we're going to get but then you just look out of the day and you look at it.
Alright, you're going to have one of these. It's awesome. It's going to be one of those days where you're just like, that day, think about it. Yeah, there you go. You've already got it. Tell me what was that day?
I was about 6 years old, flying the Nevada, Las Vegas. I was in Las Vegas, somewhere in Nevada, and they're doing this like, lap in a road race. I think it was getting miles. I'm flying in the group right with the ball car out of lap. Basically, I'm back to running. To wait for the car, and then get back and come out to give me a wheel, and then it's because I waited forever. It starts raining. It's cold. I'm 15 years old. In the middle of nowhere, trying to finish this race, and I'm like literally just out there because that there's no follow up. I'm just by myself, freezing cold, no one person is there. And my only thought was, you literally can control these people. I'm going to get off the line. And that's what I did. But yeah, I was like probably the worst day out of like.
What did you do? Did you still finish the race then?
Yeah, I had to took the time to be a really dangerous.
Lastly, mate, what is the best thing for you about riding a bike? What's one thing that keeps you going in every day? Like, oh, I can't, I love this.
For me, it's getting cycling is so special. It doesn't matter how good you are. You know, you're always in something. So for me, constantly proving myself, it kind of developing easy freedom to be it out, turning wherever you want to turn, just enjoying life. I mean, this is what's like a reason.
That's awesome, mate. Thank you. You navigated your way through these talking along very well. Great to chat to you, mate. And I'd love to be able to share a nice glass of wine with you at some point, but I don't know when that'll be.
Hopefully.
Good luck in your expecting. So exciting times ahead.
Yeah, why not? That's going to be harder than anything I've done, so ready for that.
There we go, guys. As always, a little bit of fun. Talking Lift. Like I said, next week, the Talking Lift cap, the official Life of the Peloton Talking Lift cap, Casquette and Camilino will drop. Make sure you get across and subscribe to find out when it's going to be dropped so you get your hands on it first. If there's any left over, just you get some food. Big thanks goes out to Lara behind the scenes, helping organise the podcast, giving inspiration behind the Talking Lift cap too. She was the one who came up with this idea. Of course, Will Jones who puts this episode together. But last and definitely not least, Rafa, who is making this podcast happen this year. So massive thanks goes out to them, guys. Well, until next week, guys, cheers. The music in this episode was composed by Pete Philly. Cheers, mate.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 375th episode of the Internet Things Podcast. This is your host, Stacey Newman, and your co-host, Kevin Toffel. And we have a lot to talk about today, but first I'm going to apologize for weird sounds because, once again, don't forget quarantining this happened to a teenager got committed on a bus trip to Puerto Rico. And so now again, Puerto Rico, yeah, tell her. Hola! You know what? 3 years, strangers of the past month, so for you. But that's okay. Let's get this week's show is jam-packed actually with lots of good stuff. We're going to be talking about see and Kit and we're also going to be talking about its service appear to be back on the head. Samsung has smartphones and including Microsoft and me Wonder and Cam together digital manufacturing. We'll talk about that. We've also got some ransomware news and OT security concerns for some businesses. Plus, even high-level sensitive communities have security restraints on money. And also on the chip side, there's the interesting processors. We'll talk a little bit about all that. And Arduino raised a lot of money aside from the CEO of Arduino is on the show. You know, Arduino's going to do $32 million USD that he raised. We're also going to hear from the new sponsor, really exciting but first. So Scandinavia, we've had another sponsor. This week's sponsor is Wirepass is not an issue to set up your statement in IoT. They believe in infinitely encourage the software they can never use. And they concentrate on large industrial applications. Wirepass thinks it should be forward. That's their mission. Wirepass is the future of enterprise IoT. With a recent 5G standard update, they have a chance to change the IoT. It's like my name. You can learn more at wirepass.com. That's WIREPAS.com. Alright, this week in WDC, we actually got a lot of kittens. So, Kevin, why don't you start by unpacking for us your article kittens?
Yes, that was surprising that Apple kind of would jump in front and center in their presentation because we flew a lot of the new Apple hardware and future stuff they talked about early on in the hour and a half or 2 hour presentation. They came up with a spiel on that, talked about how it's going to bring all your devices together and it'll help Apple because HomeKit users, I should say, because the joint assignments, sticking points at least early on for me. HomeKit's been the last platform I tried. Actually, had all the ecosystems I tried. I don't wait for the last week because I just combined the devices I put that were looking into the river and they wanted to mash different things together. You can certainly do that with the system and such, but regardless, the appeal here is that this is actually good for people. The matter itself is obviously good for everything. And it's interesting how Apple positioned their involvement with Matter. I'm just reading a quote from main producer of that establishes the Matter discussion. And to truly stay true to our values, we can truly HomeKit our smart home framework as the foundation of this new standard really Matter. So it's built with the same principles and contains the highest level of security. When we first heard that, like, Matter has been built by Samsung, 100, 200 different other companies. But then, like Chad and Stacey, and she brought back to earth. And to be honest, Matter is either influenced directly or indirectly by a kit. With QR code provisioning, for example, which is always good.
That's the easiest way to get a device online and people without more like
It's so simple. That's why people don't complain or anything like much about adding devices to their smartphones if they are running the kit. They've got the security features that was already way back. In fact, kit originally had hardware security requirements that didn't have because a lot of members had cost complexity, so it's a software requirement.
Honestly, that's one thing. As many devices as you had to get that in behind you.
Exactly.
Another thing is that Matter has got it's focused on confidence and resilience and things and all that. But kit has always been because Apple does really think that the user community. So if we Google and ends, they went first with solution, which again makes total sense to me. I feel like Apple's being a little disingenuous. I said it wasn't putting those kind of thing, but it was probably like I lost a little bit, right? Maybe advanced filter, just because I guess Apple did contribute a lot. It must be the user experience. It's did contribute things too. It's really Apple, and I think we'll have to try to make the experience. Hopefully, all these things check with those lines.
But if it's correct, if we have to verify that we can, but yes.
Matter still until the fall, hopefully still this year, and we'll see devices that the big vendors already said they were doing business upgrading. So that list of some of the devices will really until after the holidays, like how it's going to play out, how we're going to experience.
You and I, people in the industry, make an earlier take on that because of the review units and so on. So it's very possible and hopeful actually that we do get Matter certified devices kind of come and sale and get a feel for that because that's going to help people understand whether they're getting Matter. Should they wait for Matter? Should they not wait for Matter? And is it really all cracked up to be?
How to those, Kevin, be excited. Okay, one of the things though that Matter is supposed to do, because of the local control, or this local control and multi-pattern feature, which means that other controllers will be able to control Matter certified devices. This is going to prevent problems like, oh, y'all remember Insteon back in April? Insteon shut down its data. A lot of those Insteon's platforms, they work still locally in-house, but they didn't connect back to the cloud or the and the cloud integrations were people were sad and there was something like this. Well, it's update on Tuesday night this week, or Tuesday afternoon this week. Insteon servers came back on. Again, with no warning.
Just and the communication even still isn't as time as how long I'll say it was running on not that long ago.
Alright, they started hammering about my head. No place else to do this. I'm so sorry.
In another room, another camera stays his head.
Right, that's true. Yeah, it's the same. Anyway, so we're going to carry on. I just want to schedule it just other than calculations. I don't
It's the time ready.
Okay. They right along. The reason serves back up is because someone is purchasing Insteon IP, but we don't know who. It's likely they will continue to stay online. And I hear that the person who purchased it is trustworthy and people should feel more confident. That's all I know. And when it
sounds like maybe it wasn't
Kevin.
The Insteon app is all the app stores. So hopefully you get a good weekend because it's hard to get it right now. There are services that I'm not going to get into your updating there. I would say back up your server if you wouldn't full do it.
Yeah, some people may have to restart, like reboot their server to come back online, but apparently it's there. So yay!
Well, that's great because so many people they leave an NCS when I switch to it and telling them that kind of good foolish like
it's down for 55 days and we have no guarantees. It's still here. Someone they ask they may charge you for it, which who knows. Alright, in other news, Samsung.
Yes, Samsung is doing a little bit of app consolidation. Actually Apple showed off as well at WWDC. You're going to see a lot more of smartphone apps consolidating and adding more types of devices, groups of devices, categories of devices, and all of them. That's what Samsung is doing. It's coming out later this month in 97 countries. The software update is called Small Things for Life. It is practically a more holistic smartphone experience. Just based on one screenshot, it's because the app's not out here. We haven't tried it yet. I agree with that. And it's a smart thing for Samsung and all companies to do because Samsung sells a lot of appliances and other things that can be added to it. Like an Apple or whatever. So you have smart cooking, you can find recipes, also your appliances, shopping as well, smart things, energy, clothing care, pet care, and hair care. All things that you might have been doing in different places or in different apps, with the smart thing system. It's like you'll be able to do it all in one, which is the way it should be.
They promised us that all the way back in the day, so it was on the side.
So give it a look at the app. That's it. Or not, we don't have it yet. It's just not out.
Yeah, and I just purchased the latest smart thing. It's not from Smart Things, it's from AOTech, but my goal is to get it up and operational. And it's been a couple of years since I run Smart Things on it, and I thought, hey, let's try it. But I haven't been on for like a month. now, so
Yeah.
it's gonna happen when it's like.
I was at early smart things user got away from it, and then when they smart things, Wi-Fi, and others came out with some of those smart things. In the end, I did a second look, and it was 3 years after the original, and it was so much better. So I'm curious to see what you think the second time around.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So are the hackers.
So big industrial IoT news, a big partnership news. Drake and Microsoft want to be working together. It is a multi-year collaboration, just leveraging end-to-end solutions. So basically, P&G is going to use Microsoft's cloud for their AI stuff for industrial manufacturing, the digital twin stuff as well. And this is a big deal for Microsoft. It's some kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It's the kind of customer, flagship customer. Yeah. And I will say, industrial and enterprise customers for Windows, and it's because that's the beginning of a lot of these companies already have been working with Microsoft, so they're like, okay, now you can do machine vision, and you can imagine it's like there's features, it's pushing hard, it's nested, like Volkswagen, and I feel like other companies that should have passed this up to them.
Just a perspective for, say, what this all means. I love the pilot project they did. They their algorithms with ML, predictive analysis, the Azure platform. In Pilot, PNG was able to better predict sheet links. I know it sounds silly, but seriously, I mean, if we see a paper, we see extra time, because you're not cutting the right links, you know, you might just stuff a little extra. It sounds wrong, but these little things add up, and that's what the benefits are.
Yeah, and I should actually do a point. I wrote about this in the newsletter. I feel like I can't remember everything. But you're going to see a lot of these announcements coming over the next year or so. It used to be the emphasis was on automotive and optimization. Now you're going to see a focus on efficiencies and sustainability. And this is basically the same thing. It's just there's going to be loss of sustainability because of what the environment climate change was. Resources, all of that. So I just want to draw your attention to that because they're reading these things. Like, oh, this is for the environment. It is, and I'm glad that we're doing focus there, but I will say that sustainability and source solutions, which is good.
Yeah, I'm glad I used the paper towel, which I think is the diaper project too.
The diaper project, I do too.
But I mean, not everybody uses diapers, but paper towels.
Well, some people don't. That's true. It's a little Swedish wash closet.
Yes.
Okay, so big deal there. In other industrial news, there is forced out research for this or just this thing on ransomware. This is ransomware that uses flexibility device to get into the network and go into the OT, the operation technology network. This is everybody's favorite feature. It's not awesome because this way you can have ransomware which usually just shuts down your IT operations or keep lots of data. But now they're saying, holy cow, through this, we can go into your IT network, make it to OT network, actually
yeah, well, they could use the compute power of the OT next year to crypto miner that says, and of course, DOS attacks against us.
Your industrial process controllers doing crypto mining. Oh my gosh, that's. But
For it, if you're getting up to
disadvantage, there was kind of those trade-offs is in industrial control systems during patches underneath their OT cyber emergency readiness team for OT search available to bunches of companies. And those companies are companies in the small to medium-sized business space, which really this is also manufacturing space. And there's tons of small things that they can customize the focus for industrial parties. And if they go down, then again, it's going to cause supply chain issues that go around so much. I'm really excited to see this. It also will have bigger companies like conventions and responsible nations. Anybody who feels supply chain. And this will plug that in again and literally it's cost effective. And otherwise, I don't really work with the level of expertise in this. Sure, hey, that's it. Great. In other news, Bayard, it's an Israeli company that makes a radar sensor device at 60 gigahertz. And they started out with fall detection. They're also looking at putting their radars in cars. So people detect things like a baby in the carrier in that state where was there something different. So I love these use cases. Actually, the baby in the backseat or even like the impaired writing, that's actually something that's part of the most recent infrastructure. So the buyers basically that to me.
Yeah, this is an interesting company because I don't even believe that. And given we talked about Wire because they started in 2011, and originally sensors were meant to be used as an effective alternative to mammograms, so they're going to use these to screen for breast cancer. But they've not say pivoted, they just found new uses for the technology. Like they have the wall bug, just the stuff like the roll finder thing. They actually signed a deal just last year with Piaggio, which is the company that makes best scooters for radar-assisted systems with the imaging chip. And now they're getting into use a massive with radar imaging inside of it. So interesting to watch that go and change for the last decade, quite honestly.
Yeah, again, RF sensing much more great resolution on a detail. Everybody's done it.
Now it's 2D sensing, 4D imaging type thing.
Fourth dimension is
I suppose. Maybe in that scene.
all right. Other news are ARM has a new image signal processor, or computer vision, in IoT and embedded space. So it's low power computer vision. It's the ARM family C5. This is great. This is image for things like robotics and popping into the smartphone, scanning drones, and all of this is better vision at Org. Yeah, I feel like there's like a whole lot more information to say about this. I can get lots of talks about it, but the bottom line is we're really trying to give students low power at the edge of IoT devices back to power as quickly as possible. We're going to get as much performance in the as possible. And that's what this is. So, yeah, I think that's about all the news for this week. But now we just make for the Internet Things podcast. This is the segment of the show where we hear from you. You all can call us at 912-623-7424. We enter command an EVE water controller. And this is a device that basically plug your water hose into and you set a timer and the controller. This is great for water for garden. If you have an integrated sprinkler system, this may not be for you, but for anybody who doesn't have one, this is pretty good.
Yeah, I think you when I tested it last fall, or just
yeah, and I guess if you're not keen on the EVE, I can send you a bit, but EVE will eventually become matters. Their device will capable, so I think it's still a good option for everybody, but we'll see. So remember, if you would like to give us a call at 502-623-7421, and this week, our caller has a question about the movie. Let's hear it.
I have a take on this. I'm usually behind getting thermostat switches and water control. One is going to the construction moments, so we can take you that extra returns. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm going to start, even though you've actually been through this times than I have, Stacey, because I have to say, Joe, why are you lifting these up saying to come here saying in the area? It's just beautiful there. Scottsdale, baby, Scottsdale. I've done this before, but most of the gear was easy to take with me. So, Stacey, you're probably better equipped to use this.
Yes, because I moved, let's see, now it was 3 years ago, and I did a very formal move, and I had lots of devices. So the first thing I did, start as soon as you can. That's the first part. This is not something I'm going to do last minute. I started like 3 months ahead of time. And the first thing I did, I was deciding what should convey to the house. Because remember, if you show the house like a NIS thermostat, that means the NIS thermostat comes with the house. Same like your neutron light switches. And basically what I found was anything that was pre-installed in them, I left in them.
Like you have everything?
Yeah, like hardware. So the thermostat stayed, and the light switches stayed, the actually garage door stayed, and so did my Amazon connected faucet. That all stayed. So once I decided that anything that wasn't going to stay, the doorbell also stayed actually. Anything that was going to stay, I created a list, and then I worked from that list to authorize everything. So then I went into the account, and I said, hey, this device is associated with my account, and then it's associated with the account because I didn't know if I was going to continue on with like an NS thermostat. And I actually wrote all that down because I wanted to. And in that, I noted which had been de-authenticated or disassociated with my account. And every single device has this capability. If it doesn't, you should just take it out because it's bad. Just do that. The other thing I did, and this is why I did a spreadsheet, is I created a link to a how-to page in that spreadsheet, and then I basically had then did my like personal notes accounts, and I just had a list of the devices that were going to convey the phone, and an easy link to tell them they don't to access it or use it if they want to.
Yeah, I've just said about so I don't think they need to walk them through everything. You go how to the app, because they got to create accounts and all that information is available to manufacturers who pay the devices quite honestly.
Yes, and I will say this is the house and my lawyer actually did not care one bit about any of this stuff. And my realtor was like, this sucks. Most of it was here. And he was paying a lot of people get selling house super fast. But the person who eventually bought it actually just brought in their own CDA person. They were like, I'm a CDA person. I'll just come in and fix everything for me. I don't even think they ended up keeping stuff. They just did it. Not everyone's going to have that experience. But ultimately, they admitted to the value of those things. All that.
I mean, I still think you should do everything that Stacey said. I would do the exact same thing. But as a buyer's perspective, so thinking, do I trust that this device that they say that they says they wiped out, cleaned everything, but they trust that that's actually having some people might feel that, they will go spy on the house, do this, I'm not going to use it. So don't be surprised if they don't use it, but at least do the right thing. So you're going to deauthorize, remove it from your whatever app you're using, and keep giving instructions. I just think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and it doesn't take that much time. It's a little bit of forethought, and you obviously do have to go in and do the deauthentication, but that's something.
Get that short of the kids or do it.
No, you need to make sure you hire an intern. Right, so we're looking at your control is this house.
And I hope where you live is not doesn't have having like ACs.
We're almost done. So remember, if you'd like to give us a call, we're at 512-623-7424, and you'll be entered to win the rules to the device. And that concludes this segment of the show, but please stay tuned for the next, who is Fabio Violante is the CEO of Arduino, and he's going to talk about Arduino's from DIY to industrial and their $2 million series this week. So, but first, a message from our sponsor. This sponsor is Big Semiconductor. Hey everyone, here's again with regular this podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Big Semiconductor, and they have Kjetil Hosted from Nordic Human Links. What did you do first? Yes, Nordic Semiconductor.
Semiconductor is the leading provider of flexible power management. With approximately 2 million chips produced each day, you're probably more than 2 meters away from the technology. What makes this journey started long time ago, one microcontroller's keyboard device. It's now developing to complete the day coding and complete data for connected devices and applications. Today, Nordic is inside everything from smart devices, health monitoring, tracking, temperature, support equipment. It's also one of the things that can make you for today. Thanks to my team, now I'm ways of smart devices, managing critical infrastructure, tracking and monitoring.
Okay, but what exactly does ZWIFT do? What is it that you provide in the NFT space?
We provide the chips that frame and stable connected products in the network. We develop multiple devices with vast range of supporting software tools to build a basic cutting-edge wireless products with technologies such as energy, single internet, IoT, LTI, and now recently also Wi-Fi. We are also growing our investments into more advanced services. We partner with world-class international partners to bring this technology to our customers. Our mission is to excite all the developers out there and provide everything necessary for everyone to build great, secure, and connectable products and maximize their individual gains.
How are you supposed to make that happen? Everyone say that, so how is something really different?
We take care of delivering developer experience to offer the best possible products, but at the same time create products that are easy to implement. What DNA is built big computing power. We make products that is optimized for various different applications, virtual power and more rapid delivery. But it's not only about connectivity. In addition to the great radio for wireless SSD, also application focus on standard parameters, so they give words a single tip division or anything to get products to advanced wearables. So the developers in mind with everything they do, they take great pride in providing stable tools for development. We do different software, hardware, for investigate, and those for activity control.
That's a lot. So where do we find out more on your Nordic Semiconductor?
Nordic developers stated already that reach is still with sales support of customers. They might not know more about Nordic Semiconductor. Here we get started with our
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Advantage Podcast. This is your host, Casey Tremont, and today's guest is Fabio Violante, who's the CEO of Arduino. Hello Fabio, how are you today?
Hello, Stacy. Fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm really excited to talk to you about the right? So who's on the Arduino front just raised funding. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we just closed our round B funding for 30 million euros, and it's an important step in our history.
Alright, so that's 32 in US dollars. So that is a so it's exciting.
So our Arduino story is pretty long, but Arduino we started a few years ago. We developed innovation. We from a simple microcontroller to connected products, and now we are developing more sophisticated technology, transforming Arduino in what we consider the Arduino platform. So there is a lot of hardware, but there's also services, firmware, content, and what we'd like to do with everything is basically comply with our vision of making technology accessible and easy to use for everyone, especially enabling enterprise to use and to benefit from the Arduino technology to introduce IoT and AI into a production level. So what we're planning to do with this activity is basically work on one side on our research and development to make more professional products, more sophisticated products, but we're also trying to do a lot of work when it comes to the content and also to let people know that Arduino can be a partner for enterprise application.
Okay, that is a tall order. So this stuff that you can do with the enterprise, let's just go back to the history of Arduino, which it has a busy history with a company and project side, but it's Arduino started as a police they moved to control for the and so it's basically a have together stuff, but that's what has been quite some time. And then with the policy, we started adding shields to the Arduinos with Wi-Fi, with the foundation, and then by trying to have actually the industrial like Arduinos. Can you talk about the shift from DIY projects to this?
Yeah, so when we started looking at the ways Arduino was used by the millions of users that we have in our community, we came to a great success. So we realized that really at the moment in the hundreds of thousands of companies were using from the simplest to the most complicated Arduino products, say again prototyping tool for the prototyping of complex applications also in the enterprise world. And we noticed companies of any kind of size, the small medium businesses across the globe. And in many cases, these products were also used in production, for example, for developing test equipment for electronic development, things like that. So we developed the idea of better supporting these customers by designing an entire stack of products, not only hardware, but also the companion firmware, the libraries, and the accessories for these products to streamline the
for enterprise use cases. So scaling timing and production without disrupting the continuing, so providing a continuous flow for customers that start with a prototype and then go to scaling and mass production.
So it's prototyping is very good to scale. I'm curious these prototyping and then trying to find another chip to actually make the finished product and scale it up, if that's half the job that you want to take.
Yeah, all the types of customers. In some cases, the customer has the ability in-house to design their own hardware. So I always use it at the very beginning to do the first initial idea, testing and check on the validity of the idea, and then they have a department that can, of course, design the custom device, custom board, the custom electronics. In some other cases, when there is no internal research and development advanced capability on the hardware side, but also on the firmware side, what we thought was to provide tools that can be used as Lego blocks to build more sophisticated application without having to design a custom board. So what we're trying to do then is for those companies to entrench IoT connected products without having to invest a lot of money and energies in sourcing services or having specialized engineers that are quite complex to find. And found a lot of this point of view.
It is very hard to build a product in this setting. Somebody's having to say, but something to obviously our minister is hardware right and adding to that and plus there's something more something that they don't have added.
Yeah, from the start of the first of all, we made the Arduino environment more robust by layering the Arduino firmware APIs on top of area attack operating system. So this means that it's very, very robust now, and we have been also working on some of the most important libraries to solve the problem. For example, putting the field bus like Modbus and things like that, so providing tools to support these type of use cases. On the Modbus side, what we have been doing was a number of partnership related to AI again, quite complex context to approach from the very beginning, but creating an interesting application with quality Arduino libraries and with the different partnerships that we have made. It was something, for example, image recognition of a microcontroller or signal processing of a microcontroller without having to know all the details about the other thing that we have done. It is today available for makers, and we are expanding this enterprise. It's also to provide the other side of the equation, so the cloud side of the equation, because the IoT is a platform on the market for information about IoT. That side is quite complex as well, because the approach is always with an engineer approach, so you know everything, you start from scratch, and it's building by your application is that. Now, when it comes to IoT, security is very, very important. For example, the connection is very important, different types of connection. So what we have been doing from the software side is the cloud form that we are designing to here we use a lot of generation to simplify the approach to developing an IoT device. This is very important because people can focus on this application they are trying to implement rather than on how technically the controller is connecting securely to the cloud. Things like that. So we created what we call the digital twin that is very accessible in the cloud. We edited through the drag and drop. We generate the code that goes on the boards, but also we help people generate all the dashboards, the APIs to access the data.
Okay, given so many different companies and the early stages of their team projects, usually, can we talk clouds you're seeing as popular, what messaging workloads or the connectivity options, and what are people choosing today, and how it's changed over time?
So there is regarding let's say the cloud services, of course, it really depends on the type of company. The big players like Microsoft and AWS, the developers are playing an important role. There is a lot of fragmentation of specialized cloud. Some of them are very proprietary, some other are a little bit more open in terms of protocols, because we see a plethora of protocols with MQTT still quite popular, even with the new connectivity technology, especially for the rainflow power, we see also more streamlined, let's say, protocol use, like as you know, as Arduino, we try to standards sometimes to contribute to the standards, contribute with just a piece of code that can be used by the community, improved also from all the points of view. So it's a very fragmented market. So far, we implemented the MQTT stack with a lot of security on that, and we also have implementation in partnership with the things that work for but we also have cellular devices that are connected through 3G, and also with long-range technology like I think the adoption of the, let's say, our long-range technology has been a little bit slower compared to even our expectation, but right now we see a lot of movement there, and LoRa is becoming, let's say, the Wi-Fi of the IoT, so we see an update in LoRa as well.
Okay, let's talk about Arduinos, because for the longest time, again, I distinguish between Arduino and things like a Pi's was the thing that controls the sensors and motors and things, but then we all added a microprocessor for your streaming device forward, so I wanted to hear the logic and things that did that.
You're right, basically the belief is that Arduino is known for microcontroller, especially when it comes to real-time application, real-time application in the control. So maybe you remember a product called in the past was an important product for Arduino that was the first attempt at combining a microcontroller with a microprocessor. In that case, we're using a microprocessor that was coming from, let's say, the router industry, the gateway industry, and it was quite successful. That's basically we're providing a mechanism for making the microprocessor talk to the microcontroller, so people could develop an application that had a part of the application that was tied with the cloud and with sophisticated concepts on the cloud side, while keeping the regulatory aspect with the recent development with AD Pro. So we launched a product called X8, which tried to put the best of the technology to the available. So what's going on we have a core microcontroller Cortex M4 that is a regulatory microcontroller by H7, and on the other side we have a quad core part of the device can talk to each other with mechanism, and this allow the users to get out of both words. So it's quite important because especially the side, there is a lot of knowledge when it comes to developing Linux applications as containers, and on the other side there's a need for high-speed approach. So we brought the two words together into this product, and one of that was a speed connected product security quite seriously. So distribution, developing the application with counters that I is an expert on this topic, and we provide the ability to do device management, security management, container management together with the approach. And again, the main function that we are machines for moving from, let's say, a device to a platform that can be used reliably in production.
Mentioned differently in connection with, I would say, Raspberry Pi prototyping ability, but there were actually a lot of words out there for companies in IoT. These might like use NVIDIA chipset for like an AI which if they're able to connect a dishwasher. So is this sweet spot?
Yeah, absolutely. So from this point of view, when you look at the way our hybrid device is designed, it is really designed having a production use case in mind, and industrial production use case in mind. This means a different range, not only of the microprocessor, but also of the components that are on the board, as well as the security aspect that is quite important. So on this product, for security, we have certification, the PSA certification from. So it's a different class of devices. So we're not trying to compete with the cheapest possible microprocessor in the market, but we're trying to provide something that is robust and can be easily used in machine as a retrofit program. So send data to a cloud without having to put heaters, it's also heating devices and things like that. So it's just a device that really works in harsh condition in the next one. And it's also very secure. So basically it's very difficult, if not impossible, to tamper this of devices. Try to select components that have a reasonable security and provide some options. As you know, in the electronics right now, it's quite a complex story when it comes to components, but this product has been designed with products that have a certain level of security and have values of products that have assurance from the vendors about the availability of these products or components functionality equivalents for the future.
Yeah, use cases.
Yeah, so when it comes to use cases, there are multiple use cases. So every time there is a control part that needs to be combined with a higher level processing capability, this is supposed to work for us. For example, in robotics, AGV, mechatronics, industrial bus techniques. So these are very interesting applications where there is a control part, for example, control. Also, there is this area quite interesting, for example, of non-regulated biomedical devices. We saw a lot of interest there as well. There is an application that I personally wasn't so aware, and we are receiving a lot of demand on this type of use.
Yeah, and I'm actually tying into the security angle. Focus on the memory, so they and the PSA level security. So and the top will also allow people to upgrade other funds, Azure or AWS. Yes.
But the internet is a reason because we create this kind of real cloud of services, and it's important to improve for example, internet as well. So for the most of the version from the internet, etc. But we see a very unique kind of application that are multi-cloud today. So we have to support that as well.
And it's the real time again. I realized the cloud I'm so excited. I want the use cases are so excited.
So we have to be excited for the reasons on one side. Of course, microprocessor talked about the software, the connectivity, but we don't have to forget also how important that having sensors in the picture. So we are working quite extensively also in providing devices that brings to the users at a very accessible price point to our energy consumption, interesting sensing capability. And what we're trying to do right now is provide also intelligence and be data on the device itself.
I don't know if you had the chance to have a look at what we call the Nitla family input space. So these are tiny devices, the size of a stamp, that have sensors for multiple units, and they are combined with microcontrollers, so you can run machine learning algorithms locally to detect some patterns, or to do event recognition, or sound recognition device, and then just trigger something in the cloud. An example of this example is the insect traps service of companies that are helping farmers to log into the insect monitoring. So having this capability of the insect from the sound, and then taking a picture of the insect and then decide whether it is necessary or not to use pesticide or things like that. Allows us to reduce the impact on the environment. So inside and allows these new applications, and what I'm trying to really is to provide the set for creativity less meaning figures. Now bringing the same kind of approach to the creativity of enterprise speak, having to have a PhD from MIT, with all due respect, so I have a PhD from MIT, from University, but it is really not needed to do if we do things right. So for us, it's really exciting. It's also a source of complexity because we have not only to make stuff, but we have to make them simple.
Yes, it's always hard to make things easy, but without a double P or a PhD at MIT or any place, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for coming on the show this week.
Thank you, Stacey. It was really a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, that concludes this week's episode of the Internet of Things podcast. Please join us next Thursday, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you can't get enough IoT news, I'd love for you to sign up at www.staceyoniot.com for our weekly IoT newsletter, where we explain the qualities of things that we don't even get to on the show. Once again, thank you for listening, and please subscribe. Join Williams as an engineer with a team and a staff of just 23 people. Over the following 4 decades, he worked with some of the greatest teams, the quickest drivers, and on some of the fastest cars the sport has ever seen. Changing the whole car was never sensible, actually. The most important thing for Williams was to make sure what he did change was the thing that was going to make it quicker, not just something he fancied changing. The idea of never spending a penny on something that doesn't matter is still strong with me. Although Frank Tony retired from Formula more than 10 years ago, his influence lives on. He was a man who loved finding solutions to the things that the data didn't show, and he knew how to get the best out of racing drivers. I didn't think any driver was that much quicker than one of the others. I knew that one driver was better than the other because you saw consistently one was quicker, but I thought that pretty well any driver would be able to win in the fastest car. That turned out to be true, and it was possible to do. Welcome everyone to One Beyond the Grid. My name's Tommy Markson, and I'm delighted to have another technical genius on the show this week. Sturdy was a pioneer. In his time, he introduced some of Formula One's biggest technological advances, while also being a brilliant race engineer backside. He loved F1, especially in the years when there was more technological freedom than there is today, and he worked with many of the sport's biggest names. He was definitely a man who every driver wanted working on their side of the garage. Frank remembers his career like it was yesterday, so pay yourselves with lots of fascinating insights. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Frank, thank you. It's been a while since I last saw you. How are you? Very well. I'm very well, yeah. Still living in the same place, I believe, for 50 years. Well, now, that's an interesting point, because it's almost 40 years that you spent in Formula One. And I wanted to ask you first, which era in those nearly years was the most interesting thing? As the wars got lighter, cars got less interesting. So there were probably 2 periods I really enjoyed. One was when we were doing ground effect, but with sliding skirt, because then you could let the car move around quite a lot. And as soon as we got the next skirt, they were no longer as interesting. And the other was the period where you could do things like a single car, or active suspension, all those things which were really interesting. So those 2 things you highlighted, so that ground effect era between the late 70s, up to H1, we have plenty of skirts, which was probably better in sliding skirts, not really part of any sort of car you think of early, but they did allow a car to go off and down from the underneath and have relatively large suspension travel, so they were quite nice setup to drive. Whereas as soon as you have the Dixie skirts, you had to keep them near the ground so you couldn't get them turned out legally. And therefore we were in the stable. It was stable then for the next God knows how long. Well, it's something that we're talking about that era straight away, because of course
2022. I've got the new rules, and what I've been saying is the biggest rule change since being a Penny fan. And
Yes, indeed, it would be, and it's going to be very interesting. And I obviously haven't been involved in the concept or design of those cars. The design ones do look really similar to the, the strakes and things like that, and looks very similar to the car rules.
So in IndyCar,
Yeah, the championship auto racing teams, I think they called themselves, and they were, they were grand effective. It was a nice era. You had Lola, Reynard, Swift, and Penske building cars, and it wasn't the one to the other one, and it was very good stuff until it went one week.
then you said that you enjoyed the era that now gave you the freedom to do things like active suspension. So really, anything up until what in the 90s, is that when it started?
It's sort of, yeah. It's the thing is that people make the mistake of thinking that rules determine how expensive the cars are. And what determines how expensive the cars are is the success of the marketing department in raising cash, because everyone spends all their money. It doesn't matter whether you're buying shoes or building from one, you've got budget you spend it. So the technical regulations, it's what you spend it on, but not how much you spend. And therefore, it was nicer when you had more things you were allowed to spend your money on. Now you're spending a swimming car, looking a little lane, and maybe a bit more curve, a bit less curve, or stuff like that. To me, to have a sharp edge or a raised edge, and it makes a difference, which is almost impossible to measure. Whereas back then, we said, well, this thing's weird rather than full. There were big things. I remember coming back from a week's wind harvest with 18% more downforce. 1.8, yeah. And then, if you've got 1.8 now, you were like Christmas. We're just talking big headline things during your career. We've just discussed the era that you thought was most interesting. What was the best car you ever worked? I think the FW11V was probably overall the best because it won.
That was the 87.
Yeah, it was yeah.
And in fact, had your active suspension.
It did, yeah. That was sort of the other car was the 11, the FW11. When I joined Williams, Patrick had laid the car out and schemed up the detail almost for the bit. So I got involved in detail flipping. The only thing he gave me to do was the outer wheels skirts, which he hadn't even thought about how to do those yet. So that was my bit of the car. Then picked up the aero program for all the parts after that, which came from me, but it was a different car. I mean, he modified the structure massively because I think it obviously started off the chassis program in 1972. What was the technician in R&D that Patrick was horrified by? Well, they don't touch before, so Patrick was straight in there, improving the chassis and what have you, and I was in there with sorting out what didn't work and what better cooling systems. So that car really lasted from. If I look at the gearbox and the suspension, I actually did the detail. Patrick scheme in 1979, early 79, and it was still on the car in 1983. Yeah. Because it didn't want the bits of the car you're going to make it quicker. It was reliable, it was lighter, so it was tempting. Because there weren't many others, changing the whole car was never sensible actually, but the most important thing with it was to make sure what you did change was the thing that was going to make it quicker. Not just something you fancy changing. You joined Williams in 1970, and you've already just mentioned two other big names in the history of sport. Yeah, how many people were on the team when you joined? 23, including Frank and his secretary. And did everything grow incredibly quickly? I don't know, really. I mean, we did that. Frank and Patrick were very, very particular, wouldn't spend any money on anything that didn't make the car go quicker. For example, the first thing he got me to having a garage, he didn't pay me enough to have my own car. So the idea, and that sort of thing, and I think he said the same to Patrick, because on one occasion, I think Patrick had to shut up to work. Frank was obviously a bit concerned and said, when you get here, he said, well, I can't come, Frank, I've ridden on the car. So drove all the way to Patrick's house, gave him his car, and then Ginny to fetch him, i.e. Patrick got a company car, and it was the car Frank had been running to work. So, we had no motorhome. I think in 79, we used to get food from the kiosk to a circuit cafe, yeah, exactly. And we had to have the flywheel containers to go to the front. So all the spares got a box, all that stuff. We used to rent a truck. So there we were, spending absolutely nothing on the motorhome, absolutely nothing on the truck. We had the fastest car. And we're quicker by a lot, and yet other people have got to the parquet floor and all this stuff. And it was a lesson for me that I've always been quite tight anyway, just ask my family, that the idea of never spending a penny on something that doesn't matter is still strong in me, and yet you look at Formula One now, and I think 80% of the budget's going for something that doesn't really make the car go any faster.
Were you surprised by the success came from
Williams?
Yeah, because we're talking, let's face it, it's effectively over.
Yeah, really, yeah.
And you've been your first race in Silverstone,
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you remember the Monday after that race?
To be honest, it was just what that's what we went for.
Glad, but you know, that was another frank thing. Always trying to be better. I mean, he was pleased. Don't get me wrong, but it was the right. That's the first. You know, we're on our way now. Let's capitalise on what we're doing and make sure we do the good stuff. Where were the main things back then? The chassis, obviously, we made it stiffer. It was earlier, to be honest, but the new mods came along, almost all of them's aero. In the end, what you need to do to get more grip is to keep the dry temperature at the optimal temperature for friction coefficient as much of the grip limited time as possible. And press as hard downwards with the tyres as you can. So that's downforce and tire temperature. And if those are the two things that are the first order, if you get those two things good, so anything that gives you more downforce and less drag, anything that moves the car tire temperatures,
And you and Patrick were on the same page, so yeah. And it's that Sergeant Major quality about some new ideas, wasn't it?
the thing is, Patrick and I were friends, far off in age, so a lot of people are scared of Patrick. Were you? I'm not scared of him now. We're mates there. I was one of the people who could go in there, so I was going to say, we can have an open discussion, you say. I don't think many people in the team, probably including we have an open discussion with Patrick. The only time I suggested something that I thought might work, that he ever was ever cheating, it was if he didn't think it was worth the money it would cost. CAD was one of them. I was pretty sure that CAD would be a good thing. Patrick didn't think it was worth the money. In the end, Frank agreed that I would have CAD in return for a sticker of the car. I.e., he had nothing in the budget for it. Patrick had nothing in the budget for it. If I wanted it, if I could raise enough money to have it, then I could have it.
Was that the one instance, really, when you and Patrick were...
No, the other was the active suspension. It became obvious once we had a flat mod that the car was basically horrifically unstable. And it was pretty obvious to me that if we could control the tyre rather than just let the forces control it, it would be a game. And Patrick just thought that was going to be horrendously too expensive. He couldn't see any way that we could find any sorts to do it. But then a chap came who worked for AD project to make ambulance into ride better in the core state. And a few ideas on how that worked. And Patrick thought, well, we'll run that then. So he then said, yeah, go for it. And Nelson drove it for the first time and said, when I drove it for the first time, because everyone was finding it was going to be dangerous. I was the first person to drive the active suspension. I think the airfield that down straight in the rain on slicks. That's when Nelson, sorry, Nigel refusing to drive it.
But Frank, you're thinking to do this project on the side whilst still in the aero and race engineering. You were race engineering
in 86 Nelson.
You said Nigel did the lighting, Nelson did all of the testing.
Yeah, well, the thing, Nigel had some really scary experiences testing the Lotus active suspension, and psychologically for him, active suspension was dangerous. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. Literally that. He'd seen on me drive it. So even on one occasion, when Nigel was living, I think, in the Isle of Man, Nelson was visiting his mum in Brazil, we had to test at Silverstone. Nigel couldn't do it. Nelson flew back from Brazil to do the test. So up to the point at which it won it on 87, Nigel had never driven it. And then he said, where's mine? Of course, because Nigel's a racing driver, he's competitive, and he saw it won, and he won.
And so that win in Italy convinced Nigel that he had it.
And it was a problem because they didn't like to make much into the chassis, so they didn't take much of the cockpit area. So he had to do an absolute massive project to make another chassis set Nigel could.
It's 100%. I know you weren't Williams in 92, but when Nigel won the World Championship that year, everybody, maybe it's not wise, but a lot of people said, that actually really suited his style.
I think it suits every remember style.
Behind the scenes here at Beyond the Grid, we've been trying out AG1, a daily nutritional supplement. Many people already take some kind of multivitamin, but it's important to choose one with high quality ingredients that will actually absorb. And AG1 is one of the most nutrition-dense green powders we've tried. With just one scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins and minerals from health experts such as Tim Ferriss and Michael Gervais. Again, that's athletic green.
Favourite game, 79 on pre-order. James, yeah, because that was one reason I didn't do it. And of course, there's hardly any that level of many people on the rest of the stuff. And we've done all the practice and all the rest of the stuff. And back then, it was on Sunday morning. That's when you did your fuel consumption check and your brake wear check and everything. We hadn't run the car until the fuel. So we did and went back then. The engineers had to name the brake wear and stuff. We didn't do it. Well, you might get them to do it. Maybe on something else. Anyway, we got the brake consumption. The brake wear. No, we couldn't finish the race on either. Where the brakes out, run out of fuel before the end of the race. And of course,
the ability to have done all that work, they could really easily do that just on there. Anyway, we were still allowed to top the car up like we did. So we did that. We stuck a few things, just left a few bits of absolutely as good as you could possibly go. I just thought, the brakes, it's not been that good. The wear's going to be high when it's heavy. So I just said to Jonesy, read about whether you'll be able to finish on fuel consumption and stuff. So I'm going to have to guess everything's like. But if you can take it relatively gently, don't let the oil get away from you. Race it hard until I give you the signal. And the only signal he had that was not, timed, was the arrow to come in, was the pump offs, which is the sign you gave to remind the driver to switch the fuel pump off on the DFE. So I said, I'm going to have a think about it while you're going, and at some stage I'll give you the pump off sign. Do not get the pump off. Yeah, that's one I didn't really off by now. You give him that at the end of the first lap. So give you it again, and after that, it's up to you then. Right, so we did one at the end of the race. It was dry, but the brakes were completely worn out. The whole thing. It was those races where it could be like Ollie Cameron used to say the car should have to go over the finish line and fall apart. So that's the nearest I ever got. And that's like a massive race. Yeah, but the thing is, the idea was to win at the slowest speed possible.
That Montreal race incident, what is an interesting question about Jones. Was he malleable and technical as a driver than perhaps credit? But that race, he's just a great racing driver. He understood that the best thing to do is to win the race at the slowest speed possible. It's a bit of a Nelson thing. It's a bit of an era thing. I think Jones, he was one of the best drivers I ever worked with, simply because he knew when he was losing. Okay, so Jonesy was one of the best. Yeah, well, he was the best driver. It's impossible to say, isn't it? Because it's different eras. It was interesting working with Mike Schumacher. I don't think he liked me very much. I was much too old for him. The other drivers I worked with, he was much more into wanting to look at the data on the computer, and I wasn't going to fill his mind full of the fact that the data on the computer didn't have the most important things on it, like time temperature, the stuff I was really interested in. It was interesting because he was very fit and very fit, and very self-fit. And I worked 2 tests with him, and he was standing his way, but obviously never did a race. So that was when he was sticking with the Ligier. What stood out about him? Well, he was quick. That was the most amazing thing. When he got in the car. Now, I know the psychology of it because he was very mentally. Thierry Mousser was a mate of Senna's, so he obviously wanted to destroy him, but I don't know what he was. But he was well over a second faster than Thierry, which race through Ricardo and Lester. Can't have been that surprised at that time. He was in 1992. So, yeah, but I mean, the thing is, I just thought, I didn't think any driver was that much quicker than one of the others. He was so much faster than Thierry that I didn't believe that anybody was faster than any of the others. I actually thought that probably taught me a lesson that would take me years to learn. That the drivers were actually much closer and faster. I knew that one driver was better than the other because you saw consistently one was quicker. But I thought that pretty well any driver would be able to win in the fastest car. And that turned out to be true. And it was absolutely good. It's fascinating to look at, isn't it? On the topic of racing dynasties, you worked with both Spurs and Game. Yeah, sort of, yeah. Well, let's talk about Spurs. Yeah. Similarities between those Georgies. We're sorry to introduce it. And I said, oh, I'm speaking for it. Oh, I do hope he's disagreeing. And I said, well, I hope he's not. Disagreed, yeah. Well, Keke, that was the funny thing. I mean, Keke was very outspoken. And then he went to McLaren, and he'd obviously signed something in his contract was wrong, because the Keke who drove for McLaren was not the Keke I knew. Keke was not backwards in going forward, in opinion. But he has such fantastic car control. But it's very interesting. There are 2 driver styles that I've come across. One is where the driver comes flying into the corner at amazing speed, gives it full throttle, sees if he can take it yet. They come into the corner, go, go, Senna. Keke was like that. And other drivers will sort of come in and really turn the steering wheel too much and get on the power gently and generally have a higher G force in the big corner, but not as much going in or coming out, and that would be more weekend. So, those are 4 drivers I mentioned who are all great and have 2 quite different driving styles. So, can you say Keke and Nico were actually? I would say their approach was, yeah. The approach was different, but what about the way they drove? Well, I mean, the thing is, by the time Nico was driving for Williams, I was helping, I wasn't looking at his data in the car and all that sort of stuff. So, the first close relationship with him was, of course, Nico, I was the old bloke who used to work with his dad, with the Nakijimas. Satoru hardly spoke any English, so you didn't have a close relationship with him. You had a bit of a relationship with his translator. I think it's pretty good, to be honest, but
it's difficult to say. While we're talking drivers, Nelson and Nigel, George and Cheese as well, was that relationship always destined to break down? And they were not going together. They were very different characters. It was very weird, to be honest, because when Nigel first moved, we got on incredibly well. If we used to stay, if we were testing Silverstone, he'd be rolling around on the car with my kids, normal family. But for some reason, at some stage, I think he decided that I must be trying to have that to screw with. And it was, the relationship changed. Was that when you started racing? Or were you always racing more? Yeah, but because when he first was racing, I mean, Nelson was very good fun with others. But then Nigel used to, I do remember on one occasion, there was something in the paper about how Nelson was doing something for I don't remember exactly what it was. And Steve Allen, who'd been at Lotus, did you see him? Well, so he said that's what Nigel was thinking. So I suspect that Nigel, if he had a teammate who was closely in performance, was a bit edgy. The thing is, I've always had the attitude, even when I was race engineering one of the cars, my job is to come first and second. I don't care which one's first as long as the other one's second. How difficult was it to be a partner? Not at all. I'm a team person rather than a driver fan. For me, the most important thing was for us as a team to come first and second.
If you're finding it challenging to your own little bit of peace, it feels like one simple way to do it is through meditation. Take some time back to focus on yourself for just a few minutes each day. If you've heard a lot about meditation, go to CAR, CA, same factors.
That was the concern. Obviously, safety comes first. And then Nelson afterwards said, "Oh well, I've never been to a world championship. I'm not sure whether that was a bravado." But for me, the biggest disappointment of the year was Nelson knocking all four wheels in Detroit when going at a pace where he should have won.
Can you just talk us through the decision in Adelaide? Yes. What was looking like still a healthy car.
Yeah.
You tipped to leave him out and say, well, he doesn't use his eyes as much as Nigel, and we're going to miss it.
To be honest, when you're on pit wall, you have to activate the decisions you made previously. Making last moment decisions on the pit wall is nearly what you're wrong. So when you want to, you have really good time to discuss it. And I'm seeing Nigel's tyre fail, thinking we should bring this. Patrick had been running Nigel, and he was team principal there as well. I went to Patrick and said, what do you think? And he had already decided we should stop him, apparently. It's funny, isn't it? Because I felt guilty for years, thinking that it was me that pulled Nelson in and stopped him being world champion. And Patrick said, no, that's my decision.
It was the radio that it's car will give back. Did you have a conversation with Nelson, or was it just a straight thing now and again?
Yeah, Nelson could have said no. It would have been the first time.
How did you take it?
Well, he did that. Did he give any grief? He didn't give me any grief, no.
When you got to the second time after the race,
well, they were pretty warm. Whether they would affect, because Keki had affect. I think that's what's not in. It's as if it was a one-off for Nigel. I mean, in retrospect, we should probably have left him out. But if he didn't have a tyre failure and died, then that wouldn't have been a message, would it? So he really, like I say, he can't fix the bad.
what was your greatest strength?
I think really good at zeroing in on, if I found out too late in life that I have Asperger's, and so I've got a weird working brain, and it's quite good at what they used to call projecting. You're going through stuff and finding out what it is, and I think that's my greatest.
Now, as a man who did 2 stints at Williams, there were other jobs along the way. Why leave Williams after 10 years?
Well, Nelson was very keen that I should come to Lotus, and he said, I'm going to phone you up at 8 o'clock every morning until you agree to come. And he did.
This is at the end of 87.
Yeah. Well, it was the end of 88. He went to Lotus, decided that the car was very good and that they needed to change the way they made the car. So to go join there. And they offered me a lot of money. And the weird thing was, it got to the stage where I thought that with the active suspension and the aero and stuff, you actually needed a team of people to do it, not just me. And if there was going to be a team of people to do it, you would need me. Why would I be needed? So I sort of thought I didn't really have the ability to do 3 jobs at once, Williams did, because that's what I was doing really. The HR people mentioned it to me a couple of years ago. Get air, get this one, get that. We discovered it was only you. You didn't love it. But you loved it. I mean, I was so lucky. Can you imagine? I was so lucky to be paying for my whole career to do exactly what I like.
Did you feel let down by Nelson?
I mean, I thought we got great drivers that we, that if we made a good car, the Lamborghini engine car was a good car. It was, we hadn't made any aero gains since I started because the wind tunnel we had a contract with often didn't work.
Did was the only accident that occurred in 1990.
Sorry. You feel so responsible, don't you? It's the one thing that as a designer of a racing car, you're most scared of is hurting your driver. And he was badly injured. So yes, but if you analyse it, and again this goes just a bit like you try to defend yourself. It's there have only been 2 accidents I've seen where the drivers hit the barrier almost at 90 degrees. Martin's is one, Gonzalo Rodriguez in the Seconds through it.
Yeah, you got the phone call from Ross, is that right?
Yeah.
To go to Benetton.
Yeah.
Schumacher.
Yeah.
The thing that came after.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Ross is very good at seeing what needs fixing. And he's someone who thinks that Benetton needed fixing. I think he wanted one of his meds as well, because he was new there. He'd come from the Jaguars workshop and I think that's even the Benetton. Not the man that's having Ross.
And Schumacher, you destroyed it, but he's saying it's something detailed important.
Yeah.
Did you convict Ben that he was scoring championship? Because he was a big seven-time.
He was a 7-time champion then, never mind. Thought about it, but I never thought of it. But again,
And what about Ronald? Is he someone who deserves maybe more credit than he
yeah,
gets?
I'm actually a big fan of Martin, because I think he's a terrific driver. I think he was one of the greats, actually, who didn't possibly show in Formula 1 how good he was. He did it to the cars. But I think Martin, I really do think he's a great driver, way better than the image of Formula 1.
And he stacks up well against Lionel.
Yeah, I mean, he stacks up well against everybody. I mean, he nearly beats everything on it. Formula 3, on the year 7 were like that. Formula 3, he's a great driver.
I know that's something he used. A Williams man, and then you think of Frank and Patrick, and then you go to Benetton, and you have Flavio Briatore. It's the money man versus Frank. A bit of a culture shock.
Definitely. I mean, the thing with Flav was he really had no interest in Formula 1 at all. He was interested in it as a business, actually, money into it. I'll give you a little story. He wanted to get a good image so he could, when he went into a negotiation for sponsorship, he was famous. You know, he spent all this time building his image. You'd sometimes see it on the radio. He never said anything on the radio. It was a TV camera. And he saw it, so he thought he'd give him the old. And he did.
Going online without ExpressVPN is like leaving your most prized possession in the hands of a stranger. You just want to risk it, but you want to make sure you have it with someone you trust, and you can trust an expert to ensure you're instantly protected at all times. Just fire up the app, click one button, and you're safe. The app works on all development with Benetton, and during my Benetton contract, Flav was going to buy Licio. Flav basically said, could you go and sort Licio for me? And obviously, Licio was still being paid as chief engineer of Benetton. Well, it's been paid as technical director of Licio, so it's quite good, but by then, he had gone. So yeah, but that went wrong a bit, because my contract with Benetton was coming to an end. I went to have a chat with Flav about what the new chair, and he said, well, I'm going to sell it to Tom. So I went to talk to Tom, and Tom did a deal with me personally with TWR, not Licio. So I had a contract then with Tom, with his holding company. And he came and said, buy Licio, buy Arrows. That was a bit of a big thing, to be honest, because I had hired the people I wanted to build up my team at Licio, and they got contracts. So I was a bit fed up because my contract wasn't with Licio. They were very pissed off at me because all of a sudden I'd offered them a job and then not working with it. Did you enjoy the Licio journey with that?
I love living in. Yeah, I think Francis. When I was in just the American one, the thing is, the thing that I did that I think fitted in quite well was I was very aware of the fact that a lot of the English people assume that shouting English loud is the right way to speak to a foreigner. And I thought to myself that I'm because Jeff Lafitte, when he was at Williams, he doesn't speak very good English, but he spoke to us in English. And I thought, well, I don't speak very good French, but I'm in a French team, and it's generally don't speak English. I'm going to speak French. And the other thing that was with Jeff, he didn't speak it perfectly. Nobody cared. No, eventually I got to the stage where, I could chat in the pub with mechanics, speak in the argot, understand. The highlight of French, I think, I was on my way to one of the races, and I got the train up to Paris, representation from guiding after the I was chatting to the can't take your accent, Swiss. And I thought, yes, it's not perfect, but at least he knows I'm not English.
How different was it being a leader when you're effectively working for the national team? Did you feel the pressure and the headlines lately matter?
No, not to me. I mean, to be honest, the head of the team. I remember I obviously know to know Johnny Reed because he was the linking guy, and he came and he was complaining about something one day, and I sort of, with a twinkle in my eye, said, "I don't know why you're complaining. You initiate." What do you mean? I said, "Well, you have something in Lakeep one day, and we're doing it the next day because he reads Lakeep every day, and whatever you say we should be doing, we're doing the next day." That was wrong. And I remember Ross telling me to Ferrari, one of the ways in which they made Ferrari successful was that Jean-Todt kept the Italian press at arm's length, because one of the big problems of Ferrari is the power of the Italian press to globally the senior management or the sponsors or somebody want you to do something that you want, and that was the problem. You get Udo is having automatic gearbox. We just started having 2 race distances with it with success, and it was good. And Guy invited me out for lunch because we have all our teams and this and so lunch. And Monk just didn't want to do it because he was finding it work out. And if you could choose one adjective for summer, I think it's an adjective. Yeah. He's enthusiastic, passionate. Did he get on the other stand? Yeah, he did better than most people actually. He was the one out of the question because he knew that all the members of the government that were authorising the budget were going to be reading the key and didn't know anything about the choice. So he was the one who had to swing the difficult one. Because he was great actually. I remember he didn't often say much in meetings, but when he said something, it absolutely hit the nail on the head every time. And he reminded me of my dad. My dad was quite a gruff, strong. And he was very right. I mean, not he was younger than Nick, but he reminded me so much. And I loved him to bits. He was a great boss. And it's a shame it didn't work out for the team. It didn't have 5 years, then 8 years. Remember the launch? We all flew down to Portugal, and he was there. Max Mosley was there as the was great too. And you were at Williams, back at Williams at the time, but you did go to Toyota. Having done that stint. What drew you back? A to Formula 1 and B to Toyota? Well, I came back to Williams. That's my idea. Just rang me up one time and said, "It's ridiculous. You're one of the most experienced blokes. We're having all sorts of problems with at the moment. You need to come here and sort a few things out." So I went to Williams, and then I got made redundant later. I won't go into the details of that, but I was my second into Williams. And after that, I did work more closely with Pascal making it because Williams is basically set up. They had a setup on the car that didn't keep the tyres at the right temperature, that didn't put the car at the right height for the aero. By basically just changing the way the car was set up, we made it go from being qualifying wrecking its tyres in 10 laps to winning Monaco. That was all set up because the car was perfectly good. And a lot of the work I did on getting that sorted, I did with Scout, who was chief engineer of Michelin. So when there was going to be the new 2009 rules, which was very much a big aero change, and he and I knew each other well on, he thought maybe I'd be able to help in giving him that nice preparation regarding aerodynamics. So I did some HGF, make some changes, on the Arno, contacting the senior management in Japan. Sitting where I went to all races. So there I was, supposed to be working 3 days a week doing some aero long-term research for 2009. Found myself in every one thing. So it's quite good and entertaining fun working on that.
And the 2001 Toyota was a very good racing.
Start on this season.
It did a bit of racing. Was it Toyota ever been Shane, why it worked?
I'm going to be unkind, but the problem with Toyota was that the 2009 car was pretty good. It went through a phase of developing properly because they wanted, I won't go into the detail, they made some changes to things, though they went up with bits of data, which resulted in going from being the fastest car in Melbourne, having the podium for the midlane, to being the slowest in Monaco. I think the problem was that Toyota got such a bad reputation in the press that they were never seen by the outside world as good as they had been. As a result of which they didn't get the best driver. I'm pretty sure that if we had done as well in 2009 as we perhaps could have done, and Alonso joined, because I think Alonso thought sufficiently highly of Pascal Massa from his perspective that he maybe could have been persuaded.
Wasn't there motors on the phone? They're the wrong people who got it.
Well, eventually, I think that when I went there, I would say the motors on it was wrong. They had some very good engineers. They were doing something, for example, it was different to the thing to have the trail crew running around. So I've never gone anywhere where the work on the structure and the success of the constructions at the level of Toyota is by miles the stiffest car I've ever had anything to do. It actually is the most important thing. So one of the parameters that they were exceptionally good at and targetedly good at was to make the car better in a way that wasn't going to make it faster. And once they'd accepted that, I mean, if you look at the progression during 2008, the car got better and better and better. At the beginning of 2009, the car was good. So they have the capability of doing a very good job. What they didn't have when I joined, I would say, the targeted things to get good. Well, Frank, thank you very much for your time. It's been wonderful to chat. Yeah, nice to see you. Nice. I've got something. Toyota story sums up what Frank was all about in Formula One. He knew the areas on which the team needed to focus. That's why he enjoyed so much success over his 40-odd years in the sport. But what a wealth of knowledge and anecdotes. He painted in such a good picture of Williams, and who knew that he was the first person to test the team's active suspension system at a completed airfield in the UK. Slicks in the wet and more. Frank, many thanks for your time, and thank you for sharing so many stories with us. As ever, please remember to send in any thoughts or stories that you have in Frank. Have you ever worked with him? Which of his cars you like the most? Send in your messages, and I'll read out some of them on next week's show. Which brings me on to what you sent in about Bobby Rahal after last week. What a racing icon that man is. Let's start with this from Jack Burke. Great chat with Bobby Rahal. He says, I remember Channel 9's coverage of the 2001 Belgian Grand Prix in which Dazzy Slick said to Alan Jones that Nicky Lauda was coming into Jaguar. And the immediate response was just, oh geez, that's not going to end well for Bobby Rahal. Proper name to the man Rahal. Thanks for that memory, Jack. Bobby was really fascinating about the whole Jaguar racing chapter in the show, wasn't he? He could see the writing on the wall as soon as Nicky arrived, couldn't he? Next, let's hear from Ryan Janaka. Loved your chat with Rahal. He says, one of the most intelligent and eloquent races. Formula One, Canada, to IndyCar and IMSA, the man's done it all. He was my childhood racing idol. He's an interview multiple times since this episode. Pleasure, Ryan. And you're right, it is such a good advert for our schools. Finally, let's go to Tonga Mintika Music. This conversation was very insightful. Just listening to Bobby share his memories of Formula One, as well as his affinity for Jim Clark and his experience in motorsport. Thanks for the message. I, like you, loved hearing what Bobby had to say about Jimmy Clark, who was cleared such a central pillar for all aspiring racing drivers in the 1960s. Car heroes, and Jimmy was a good one for Bobby to have. Well, that's it for this show, and please remember to send in your stories about Frank Dillon. We'll be back next week with another fantastic conversation on the world of Formula One. Now, make sure you follow F1 Beyond the Grid on your podcast so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, why not check out the latest episode of F1 Nation, where President Victor, David Hill, and I are reunited as we head to this weekend's Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Thanks for listening. F1.
We can dance, to this vibe, to my vibe, your vibe, our vibe. It doesn't matter, just dance. Now dance, baby. Just dance, baby.
Use that lock. Right here.